On March 20th, Annabel Goldie, the British Minister of State for Defense, declared that as part of an aid package to support Ukraine's ongoing war effort against Russia, her country would provide depleted uranium munitions. In January, Britain committed to providing 14 Challenger 2 tanks to Ukraine, and the majority of the training for Ukrainian personnel has already been completed. When Britain pledged to send 14 Challenger 2 tanks to Ukraine, it became the first country to offer Western-designed tanks to Kyiv. Later, under significant pressure from the United States and Poland, Germany also granted permission to supply Leopard 2 tanks, which are widely used across Europe, to Ukraine. Interestingly, Britain is now the first country to commit to supplying this type of shells. In this video, Defense Updates analyzes how Russia is so irked by Britain's decision to supply depleted uranium munitions to Ukraine. Let's get into the details. Depleted uranium is a byproduct of the process of enriching natural uranium to create nuclear fuel. It's considered less radioactive than naturally occurring uranium since it contains a lower amount of the fissionable material U-235. With a density that is 1.7 times greater than that of lead, uranium is exceptionally dense metal. This characteristic makes it ideal for applications where having a large mass in a confined space is beneficial. During the 1970s, the U.S. Army started producing armor-piercing rounds utilizing depleted uranium. It's also added depleted uranium to the munitions fired by the Air Force's A-10 Close Air Support Attack Plane, known as the Tank Killer. Depleted uranium shells were used in both Gulf Wars and in Serbia and Kosovo. Over time, depleted uranium has also been incorporated into composite tank armor to enhance its strength. Since it's produced using low-level radioactive waste left over from the manufacture of nuclear fuel or nuclear warheads, it's affordable to produce in large quantities. Goldie was asked directly whether depleted uranium munitions would be provided, and she responded, "Alongside our granting of Squadron of Challenger 2 main battle tanks to Ukraine, we'll be providing ammunition, including armor-piercing rounds, which contain depleted uranium. Such rounds are highly effective in defeating modern tanks and armored vehicles." The munition most likely being referred to is the L-27A1 APF-SDS, or armor-piercing, fin-stabilized discarding sabot round, which is compatible with British rifled tank guns. L-27A1 APF-SDS, also known as Charm 3, Challenger Armament 3, features a penetrator made of depleted uranium to defeat complex armor arrays and advanced forms of ERA. Viewers may note that uniquely among NATO main battle tank guns, the L-30A1 in Challenger 2 is rifled because the British Army continues to place a premium on the use of high-explosive squash head, or HESH, rounds in addition to APF-SDS. There's a strong possibility that Britain intends to establish a precedent that would facilitate the US and Germany in providing depleted uranium weaponry for their own tanks, which are also expected to be supplied to Ukraine. If the US and Germany follow in Britain's footsteps, they could provide Ukraine with M829 APF-SDS rounds, which is compatible with the M1 Abrams and Leopard 2. The head of the Russian delegation to the Vienna negotiations on military security and arms control, Konstantin Gavrilov, stated on January 25th, "We know that Leopard 2 tanks, as well as Bradley and Marauder armored fighting vehicles, can use depleted uranium shells, which can contaminate terrain, just like it happened in Yugoslavia and Iraq. If Kyiv were supplied with such munitions for the use in Western heavy military hardware, we would regard it as the use of dirty nuclear bombs against Russia, with all the consequences that entails. Russian President Vladimir Putin stated, "If all this happens, Russia will have to respond accordingly, given that the West collectively is already beginning to use weapons with a nuclear component." Although Putin did not provide any details, the Russian leader frequently uses nuclear-related warnings, primarily as a means of convincing Western nations to restrict their involvement in Ukraine. Meanwhile, Sergei Shoigu, Russia's defense minister, said there were now fewer and fewer steps left before a potential nuclear collision between Russia and the West. Vyacheslav Volodin, the Speaker of the Russian Parliament's lower house, said rounds containing depleted uranium could lead to a tragedy on a global scale that will primarily affect European countries. Volodin said the use of such U.S. ammunition in the former Yugoslavia and Iraq led to radioactive contamination and a sharp rise in oncological diseases. Moscow also has its own Svinets 2 depleted uranium tank shells in its stockpile. The U.S. has come in support of Britain. White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said the ammunition, which enhances the ability to overcome defenses on tanks, is not radioactive and not anywhere close to going into the sphere of nuclear weaponry. He said, "This is a commonplace type of munition. If Russia is particularly concerned about the welfare of their tanks and their tank soldiers, they could just take them across the border back into Russia. I think that's what's really going on here, is Russia just doesn't want Ukraine to continue to take out its tanks." Britain responded by accusing Russia of deliberately trying to disinform. Depleted uranium has nothing to do with nuclear weapons and capabilities, the UK Ministry of Defense said, and said it was a standard component used by militaries, including Russia itself. Russia knows this, the spokesperson added. The United Nations Environment Program has described depleted ammunition as chemically and radiologically toxic heavy metal. The IAEA, or International Atomic Energy Agency, says high concentrations in the kidney can cause damage and, in extreme cases, renal failure. While depleted uranium shells are technically not nuclear weapons, they are hazardous. The exploding shell can spread them in the air to over 25 miles or 40 kilometers, and these can be easily inhaled in the form of dust. Depleted uranium has a half-life of over 4 billion years. Interestingly, Taiwan, which is getting M1A2 tanks from the US, has gone with tungsten carbide armor in their variant instead of depleted uranium armor. Russia has lost a lot of tanks and armored vehicles, and with modern Western tanks being transferred to Ukraine in the coming days, the loss could increase significantly, especially if depleted uranium shells are provided. Given the fact that these shells would be used on Ukrainian land, the main reason for Russia's concern is not environment, but the increases in penetrative power.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more videos like this. Hit the like button if you find the video interesting, and kindly provide your feedback in the comment section. This will help us improve.